Hello, this is Pharaoh Vincent with Nation 473. Today we're doing the final bit of our formation to understand how to make fleets in Age of Z Origins, right? Like, we're going to learn how to make god tier fleets. This video is going to be a little bit different because I need to pull in a couple of extra concepts to finalize and round out your fleet knowledge. I'm going to go through the melee troops. This is actually a fairly quick portion of the video, but understanding how different abilities interact with your fleet setup is going to give you that final piece of how do I set up my fleet going forward. So without further ado, let's lay the groundwork. You need to understand where your city's at, because every city is going to be a little different. And we can make decisions based on what you have available to you. So, I will be referring to the Queen's Crown. That's the name of this particular ability. Of course, Empress Escort is the main ability here that every 10 seconds increases the total damage reduction for melee troops by a percentage. Okay, so we need to understand this ability because it interacts with other abilities that we have available to us. And when it comes to the other thing that we really want to understand is around officers' breakthrough skills. So I'm going to talk a little bit about them, but specifically the drill masters have skills that we need to then think of when it comes to building our melee troops. Katie's is the two troop types with the most units have a 35% chance of dealing an additional attack after normal damage, right? So basically, they have a 35% chance, or 1 out of every 3 attacks, they're going to hit again. Simon's tactical block, 4 troops with the most units will gain a percentage chance to reduce damage taken for a single hit. Maria is just middle and back row troops can crit. And Eric, whenever people start getting him unlocked, works similarly to Katie. 2 troop types with the most units will deal damage, giving a burning status. Bada bing, bada boom. Pretty simple. So, understanding this is going to help us understand a little bit more about the overall flow of your map, how it's going to work, what units are going to hit at what times. So, melee troop-wise, we're going to start off with the T12 armored soldiers. Statistically speaking, they're honestly the exact same as a T12 shredder. Slightly more hit points, but not by much. And that's if I'm head mathing correctly. But in general, this particular unit really just specializes in its active ability, reflective armor. It's a 35% chance to reflect 20% of damage back to the target. This is a damage reduction. So when it reflects, it does prevent that damage as well. These are usable. And they're really nice if you're using a 4-fleet setup to maximize your Simon. So we'll talk about specific numbers and how I use them in a second. But conceptually speaking, there is a use for the T12 armored soldiers. Also, melee cities, consider using them fairly frequently because they actually hit pretty decently with this. Because it's 20% of damage, the stronger your opponent and the more reduction and damage reductions you have, the less damage you're taking, right? The more this hits back. So it actually can win you a fight, surprisingly enough. It does pretty decent damage. For the next unit, it is the bread and butter, everyone's favorite T12 shredder. Again, stats almost exactly the same. but except the hit points, yeah, are a little bit higher on the other one because it'd be around 2,300 if I'm head mathing right, but it's really close. The active ability is defensive stance. So damage reduction is triggered every 8 seconds that lasts for 4 seconds. We're going to talk about this ability. It's 34% damage reduction, which is pretty significant. This doesn't really go down for the T10s. I believe it stays the same across every level, right? So you can see here, it's a fairly good unit. I mean, even if you're going all the way down, even to like basic T2 shredders, this ability doesn't stop. So it's pretty nice. The next unit, and I'm bringing this one up now because it's going to help us to highlight a point here in a second, is the T11 axes. We will be getting these at T13. In defensive battles, and this is specifically defensive battles, it does the exact same thing as the T12 shredder, except it's a 50% reduction. Statistically speaking, it is 16.6% difference between a T11X and a T12 shredder. So while this ability is active, they are on par statistically with a T12 shredder and are on par statistically with a T12 armored infantry. Now, the asterisk is that those units also have their active abilities, which will then make it better than the T11 axes. But just to highlight the effectiveness of this in a defensive battle, a C-33 throwing out T11 axes as a reinforced troop for defensive battles can perform similarly to a C-38. Pretty cool. Minus stats and a bunch of other stuff, but we're not going to get into that. But what I do want to highlight, though, is this ability, right? Like, for both the shredders and the axes, we need to understand how this works. Because for basically 50% of the fight, you get 34% damage reduction. But you also have the Queen's Crown, right? Empress Escort. That lasts for 6 seconds, and it launches every 10. So what this looks like is you have 4 on, 4 off for this ability. And then the Empress Escort is 6 on, 4 off. And I wanted to go ahead and just kind of highlight just a little bit of what that looks like visually. So, Excel. This is a 38-second long battle, which, by the way, is a fairly long battle in the grand scheme of AOZ. Most fights don't last that long in, like, the uranium mines. This would be a fairly sizable hit that would have to go past this. You know, I mean, I have had, like, 2-minute long battles. They're a slog and hard to follow. But you can see the 2 abilities. In blue here, I have just marking where like honor guard or the defensive stance, I believe is what it's called, activates and deactivates. And in red, you have Empress Escort for the Empress's Crown. And so you can see at the 7 and 8 second mark, there is no defensive ability for melee, which doesn't happen again until 31 seconds. And the next time you have a sizable overlap is going to be for 4 seconds at the 39 second mark, so up until 43 seconds. And then both abilities will reactivate at the same time, and we'll start this pattern over. So, which then gets to its own animal of how to calculate how it's going forward, but you can see where this is again. 4 on, 4 off. 4 on, 4 off. A lot of people will look at this too, and they're going to think, oh, well, if it activates once every 8 seconds, that means that like at 16 seconds, it would activate. Well, technically no, because it needs an extra second to activate through each cycle because it has to pick up on the odd number. Is all. So then it'll pick up into an even number again, 4 on, 4 off, 4 on, 3 off. We go on forever. So I highlight this as I think this could help visually see what I'm talking about when it comes to those defensive abilities for those and how they interact and overlap. So the next troop is the T11 tank. We will be getting these at T13. Their ability is bulletproof armor. 31% chance to block 50% of damage. AOZ doesn't work that way perfectly. Like when it says 31% chance, it's an odd. So every third hit, it's going to activate because the percentages in this game aren't true percentages. It's not like it has a chance to activate each and every hit. It will activate every third hit. It's an iteration. Way too much testing goes in to figure out that works that way. You have to watch battle reports about 900 times. But a big thing to note with this is how to maximize those units and how they work, right? Because you still have your Empress Crown, and you're going to have your tactical block, right? And so you have all these different working pieces that come in to make a full fleet setup. So part 2 of the video, we finally understand the troops. We finally understand a little bit about what they're doing. So what kind of fleets do I do? I want to highlight one in the uranium mines where I got attacked by somebody. They were sending more troops. Statistically speaking, they have a higher long-range attack. They actually have higher melee hit points than me. The biochemical zombie attack is not so great. And they could use some work on their increases and reduces damage statistics. Power-wise, this player should be a very difficult battle for me. And you can kind of see that reflected, right? Killed over half my troops. But only over half, right? To show my stats, right? 710, 929. My increases and decreases are significantly higher than theirs, right? Like we're talking 3-4%, which is, I mean, you guys may not see that as significant, but like 3-4% of 1,000% LRA is like 30% reduction, right? Same thing on the opposite end. Me having almost 20% higher increases damage to long-range troops than he had reduction means that I am hitting 20% harder on my long-range attack, which is another 180 LRA that I'm adding. So again, I haven't done this a while in a battle report video, right? But this is what you need to know about, okay, well, what kind of things are we working with here? But the fleet is what matters. This is my double defensive T11 fleet. You're going to probably be seeing this a lot at T13s, especially on the uranium mine, where you use axes and tanks. And for very easy reasons. This is activating Simon's tactical block, right? So currently, the units with the highest number of troops are going to be my axes, my tanks, my cannons, my EMP cannons, right? Everything else falls below the threshold, therefore does not activate tactical block. Now, this is where we're getting into some really cursed tech. Katie and my lovely friend Eric, whenever I get him, also have an ability that is the 2 units with the highest number of troops will then have a chance to attack again. That number for the melee is 50k. So the reason why this is a really nice one is because it's breaking through, keeping these two unit types at 50k while still giving me 100k front. And I'm able to supersede that number on both the cannons and EMP cannons. Therefore, meaning all of my KD procs are coming from those two units. When you look at my attacker's fleet, right, he is using a double front, but he's using axes, which, again, do not have any benefit to you in offense. They only work from their ability on specifically on defensive battles. So I would have liked to see just 4K shredders. They would have actually been statistically superior to these T11 axes during their active windows. But with Empress Escort, that means that there's only like 2 seconds that we have to deal with them not having some kind of defensive advantage. But then on top of that, they're also sending like T12 snipers, which are terrible units, and then the T11 cannons. So assuming that they have all the same stats and benefits that I do, these two troops are getting the benefit from Simon's tactical block. And then these two troops are getting KDs, which is very similar in that regard. So it's not the worst fleet. I think we could improve it, though. I do think that these are going to hold you back. But let's watch the video and find out for sure, did these do any good, right? Well, first off, they're melting. And compare that on the opposite end to mine. We had a similar number of the T11 axes at the start of this fight, right? He has 40k, I have 50k. His snipers lock on to my T11 axes. He has higher long-range attack than me. He is sending more units of T11 snipers, which individually hit hard. They hit harder than my cannons and EMP cannons do per shot. But my axes last longer because it's a defensive battle. So, I call out these things because this is how you can think of your fleets from now on. When you get to what is currently, and I want to use some asterisks here, what is currently the best fleet setups in the game. And best is some huge air quotes because I think there's so many variables that we can play with, right? What I want you guys to think about isn't so much what fleet worked for me, but it's what is that fleet accomplishing. At C38, my ideal fleet would be around 100k or 10,000 T12 T12 shredders for melee, sprinkled in with another 25,000 for 150k total front of the armored infantry. And that's just because they're better than the tanks will be, statistically speaking, because that once every 3 hit, 50% doesn't help me. So this would actually statistically be the better bet. I would also want to have, so again, we have a 100k base. That means we're looking at a total of at least 100k or 105 is what I usually like to go 5k over for KD, but like 105k T11 cannons, or you could do the T12 snipers. Either way is fine by me. The other part of this, though, is going to be the last bit of everything that you have, again, C38, going into your EMP cannons. And you need, again, to get over the 100k threshold so that you can make sure that they are getting your KD procs. Don't let your melee eat up your good damage sources. They're there to keep you alive. They're not there to deal damage. Probably controversial for melee players, though. Don't listen to me if you're a melee player. Um, if you are a melee player, I say invert some stuff around, right? So instead of doing 100k or 150k front, you're going to want to do 150k long range troops because those are going to keep your Titans alive longer. And I'll let you choose, but you're probably going to use T12 EMP cannons as your 100k and another 50k troops worth of T11 cannons, just because that splash damage is going to be crucial for you. Think about it though. For my melee players out there, let me know how these kinds of fleets work for you. I mean, I know I've seen Flex Nuts just throw out like 400,000 T12 shredders and kill people, which is incredible. Because in those fleet setups, like really his officer breakthrough skills are just dealing damage, and that's the only thing actually killing people. I'm sorry, Flex Nuts, if I'm offending you at all, but this is just the truth of the matter is I don't think your melee's hitting all that hard. Like, don't get me wrong, they deal damage, but you're going to be getting a lot more of your damage sources from like Tifa and Zeus than you are going to be from the actual physical damage that your tanks can do. At least in theory. So play around with it. This is also where I want to leave you guys with battle map placement. It's the last thing that you need to understand. And the reason behind that is if you're a mid-range city or a long-range city, your objectives are different than each other's. So, I don't think this is a mid-range player, is it? No, long-range. When it comes to, we'll play around with this video anyways. When it comes to placement, actually, bad video. When it comes to placement of troops for mid-range and long-range, the goal you should have, sorry, getting over something. But the goal you should have when it comes to mid-range and long-range is going to be where your where your troops are will matter towards getting you the most bang for your buck, right? So, I don't remember where a mid-range player is at this moment, so we're just gonna hopefully find one soon. What I would recommend kind of looking at, let's watch this video again, because he at least has, or at least I have all the troops. When you watch rockets, on the second hit, they launch their overshoot, right? And then pow. So right now, this overshoot is hitting the T11 tanks because the snipers are all the way back here. With a fully mid-range city, the most mid-range players were going to put just a few rockets in, and when you put in the rockets and nothing else, it changes where they are on the map. And so you can actually move your rockets inside of the damaging window of a long-range city. So what you need to know when you're setting up your fleet is where things are being placed. So, finally, a mid-range city. He's a little bit weaker, but it's fine. We can use this as a great example. So, when it comes to where the troops are, right, you can see here that his rockets are on the second spot. That means he is currently being held at bay, not being able to deal any damage at all to these troops because his range is only 2.5. So when you see these things, I was like, he did end up hitting my snipers because they walked too far forward. But when you have these troops, what you want to do is try to keep the rockets to the outside. So the best kind of C-38 setup And generally, the best setup for most cities would be to throw in a single axe, which will kick this over to the left, which means these rockets are going to stop walking sooner, which means that they're not going to be able to hit these long-range troops, and therefore you have effectively mitigated a long-range city or a mid-range city, because now all they can do is hit your tanks or shredders, and they can't hit your damage-dealing troops, which means that they can't beat you. On the flip side of that, though, this is with a 4-back fleet. So I'm doing all of this setup to talk about one thing, and that is if you end up in a spot where you have your T12 EMP cannons, they're still in range, even with this thing that I just mentioned. So what you have to do is you need to eliminate the snipers or the cannons, I don't care which, keep the shielders, and that'll bump it over one space. They will be over here, just like you see on this one, and they will be out of range of the rockets again, which will be hitting, if you're a C-38, your T-12 shredders, ineffectively, I might add. So, just throwing out all of these different things to note where specific units are on the map really does help you to plan an effective means of dealing with all fleets. If you know that they're mid-range, you can plan for that. But if you don't know that they're mid-range, just add in the single axe. Kick it over to the left. That's all you got to do. So, think of your placement. Make sure you're keeping your long-range troops outside the range of a mid-range player. And as a long-range city, you should win most of your fights at that point. So, congratulations. This is how you beat mid-range players as a long-range city. You're going to need to know that in less than 24 hours. I think everyone on YouTube is going to need to know this in less than 24 hours. Because the stormtroopers suffer from the same issue as the rockets. So the stormtroopers have to hit targets within range. See, prioritizes enemy back row within range. Their range is 2.3, which is smaller than the rockets even. And they're going to be on the far left side. So when you are doing, that's take again, when you are doing your fleet setups and you're starting to talk about like, okay, well, hey, where is this going to be? I wish I took that player's name down. This one? No. When you're starting to think about, oh, it's this one, I think. Yeah, okay. So when when we're talking about the best thing for C-41, if you notice here, your good damaging troops are now on the same side as the stormtroopers. The stormtroopers are right here. Those are stormtroopers. That right there is what you need to avoid. So, kick your troops over to the right. Again, shielders. Kick your troops over to the right. And just like in this fight, what do my snipers hit first? My snipers have locked onto their T-11 stormtroopers. First thing in this fight. Why? Because there's no melee in front of them. This particular player has a very bad fleet for what they're doing. And pray that every C-41 does this, because if you can have your snipers lock on first thing in that fight, you're going to win every time. If they do have melee in front of it, the best hope you have is to sacrifice some snipers kick your troops out to the left this time around, add in a single armored infantry to kick all of your melee troops to the right, and you shift the battle map this way by killing all of your shielders. So again, no shielders. You can do cannons, EMP cannons, single one there that pushes these guys over onto this part of the map by the Titan and Warplane, and then they're shooting this way. And that's how you split the map and keep your good damaging troops out of range of mid-range players. This is all conceptual until C41 comes out, but I wanted everyone to think through it. So I know this is a long video. We talked a lot more about things than I thought I was going to. But I want to impress upon you why I do things the way I do it. I'm thinking about where things are on the map. And that's why I recommend these kinds of fleets, because they really do set up perfectly for all different kinds of scenarios. And, you know, this poor player wasn't strong enough to beat me normally, but even with that, like, you can see how melting it can be when you have a good fleet against somebody, right? When you have a fleet against a player who is arguably stronger than you. I don't know. I can't say this is completely stronger than me, but he's pretty strong. But I'm still winning because my fleet is set up in a way that makes a lot of sense. So this is where I will leave the video. Please let me know down in the comments what kinds of fleets you're playing around with and like how you're utilizing some of this information. Love to know. I mean, obviously as much data as I can possibly get. So, you know, your anecdotal evidence of like, hey, this has been working for me. This is what I do. This is how I made these videos. This is how I came up with all this stuff, was talking to people about what works for them. So please let me know. As always, consider leaving a like on the video. It really helps the channel out a lot. And subscribe to the channel. That way you can get notified of all my future videos coming up. And I'll see you on the next one.